Yes, please.
Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir, it's with a deep sense of anguish and pain that as a nation which has been deceived, I raise this issue of public importance. Two Italian Marines who were being prosecuted in Kerala for ostensibly killing Indian fishermen have now absconded. And they have absconded as a result of a deception, an outright fraud which has been practiced on the government of India and on the Indian Supreme Court by a sovereign nation. We've heard of state-sponsored terrorism, but this by a democratic country which ostensibly claims to be committed to the rule of law. This seems to be the first such case of a state-sponsored deception and a state-sponsored abduction. It's a state-sponsored abduction because they approached the Supreme Court of India ostensibly on the pretext, first, that the two persons being prosecuted have to go to their home to celebrate Christmas. Since we are a civilized jurisprudence in India, our court yielded to the request. The second one was a little curious, that they want to go home in order to cast their vote. The little law that I understand, when you are in prison, you don't have a right to cast a vote. So if an Indian prisoner had approached an Indian court saying, just release me because I want to go and cast my vote, this request would never have been entertained. Even for Italian citizens living elsewhere in the world, there is a facility available that even if they were not in prison, assuming they were not in prison and they were outside, and I read from the Italian Interior Ministry's notification, the Italian citizens residing abroad are entitled to vote by mail for candidates. So they could have easily voted by mail. This appears to be a little prescripted. It is prescripted because even when your law provides a facility of voting by mail, you submit to the jurisdiction of the Indian Supreme Court. You want a facility to go abroad. An order which should never have been passed gets passed, and you are entitled to go abroad subject to a sovereign. I have reason to believe that this sovereign undertaking, though given by the ambassador of Italy, is approved by the Prime Minister of Italy. And this sovereign undertaking is given to the Indian Supreme Court. And after this sovereign undertaking is given to the Indian Supreme Court, they go abroad, and then the government of Italy turns around and says, because we have disputes with regard to jurisdiction, we are not going to ask them to come back, and now they stand absconding from Indian law. Well, disputes of jurisdiction can only also be raised in Indian law. When our citizens are prosecuted, for 1984 people, for incidents which took place in India, people have filed prosecutions in the US. We go and object, you have no jurisdiction. And here is a country which is for the third time. In the 1980s, you had a defense transaction. Somebody absconds from India through Malaysia, Argentina, gets a refuge there, we are rendered helpless. In the VVIP transaction, the helicopter deal, our officials go there, they come back empty-handed because we are now told that there will be evidence available against some of the Italian citizens plus others in India who may be guilty of bribery. And our investigation finds it difficult to proceed further. And this is an extreme case where there is a case of a state-sponsored deception and literally you abscond from the jurisdiction of the Indian courts. What do we do, sir, under these circumstances? Are we a helpless state that India will do nothing in this matter. So my submission is that now a time has come, after these three experiences, that when you deal with the Romans, deal as the Romans would deal. And therefore, to say that we are now bound by conventions of diplomacy, etc., when they have broken every rule of diplomacy, it's a time for the government of India to act. Sir, I doubt seriously, and since the law minister also is here, I would urge him to consider this. I doubt seriously whether the ambassador who has on behalf of the government of Italy given a sovereign undertaking is entitled in this case to the benefit of what is otherwise referred to as diplomatic immunity. He submitted to the jurisdiction of the Indian Supreme Court. Once you submit to the jurisdiction, you can't claim diplomatic privileges. Secondly, sir, the Vienna Convention is a 1961 post-constitutional convention. We have legislated to given it the shape of does not override the Constitution of India, and the Supreme Court of India has power to punish for its own contempt, which is under Article 129. The Vienna Convention will not override Article 129 of the Indian Constitution. And in any case, the law minister may examine whether post-constitutional treaties, and the Vienna Convention being one, can override the Constitution of India. I seriously doubt it would, particularly when the government of Italy and their ambassador has submitted to the jurisdiction of the Indian Supreme Court. Therefore, sir, a time has come, since we have been treated in this manner for the third time, I think we should forget diplomatic niceties. So there is a very interesting quotation from something which is never so serious. It was one of the legendary characters created, and some of us may remember it. He said, once is happenstance, twice is a coincidence, three times is enemy action. This is James Bond, Ian Fleming's famous quote. And this now must be treated in the category of an enemy action, that you abduct a person, take him outside the jurisdiction of India, and then say, India can go to hell, we are not concerned. Therefore, this matter, the government of India must respond and must be taken up in all its seriousness.
Now to associates,